Hello, my name is John Combs. I am a securities entertainment attorney. I've been working with low-budget independent filmmakers for some 30 years or so, helping them comply with the federal and state securities laws when they're seeking to raise money from investors. And that would be passive investors, because that's basically the definition, as we've seen, of a security. So if you're raising money from passive investors, selling a security, and you have an obligation to comply with securities laws, you don't have to comply with securities laws. That's like saying, well, you don't have to comply with traffic laws, but there could be consequences. And the same is true of securities law. So, what we're going to talk about today is, well, what are the consequences of not complying with securities laws? Now, my name again is John Combs. This is my contact information. My bio is at my website, filmfinanceattorney.com. So we don't need to spend time on that here. I'm happy to entertain your questions. If you have a question, as a follow-up, this is just a brief presentation. So we'll talk about failure to comply with securities laws. Now, how do these enforcement problems or litigation or compliance problems start? Well, you have to understand that any investor can become a disgruntled investor, a so-called disgruntled investor, somebody who complains to an enforcement agency or goes to an attorney and complains about about giving you $50,000 or $100,000 for your film. And the reason they're complaining may not have anything to do with you or your film or how everything went. Their circumstances might have changed during the course of time. And so there's no relationship between their motive for being a disgruntled investor and what you're doing. They can initiate an SEC investigation, the SEC being Securities Exchange Commission, the federal agency responsible for regulating the offer and sale of securities, or they can go to their state. Each state has their own securities regulatory authority, and they conduct investigations based on a complaint of an investor. Or they can go to an attorney and pursue private litigation. Now, I make the statement here that some filmmakers have gone to prison. Now, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to state the fact. Some filmmakers have gone to prison. Now, I'm not saying that it happens often, but it does happen. And in fact, I wrote an article about one particular case, I don't know, some 7 or 8 years ago, that was with some filmmakers, I say, quote, filmmakers based in San Fernando Valley there in the Los Angeles area. And they raised several $1,000,000. Ended up not even making the film. Most of the money went into their pockets. And the two guys who were the closest thing to being filmmakers brought in an entertainment attorney who did not have much of a security background, and actually talked him into forming the investment vehicle. So it looked to the SEC like the entertainment attorney was running the show when he really wasn't. So I think now, I mean, the entertainment attorney made some mistakes, obviously, but there's an article there in September 2019 Los Angeles Lawyer Magazine issue that you can read. And it's not just about that case, although it's mostly about that case. I went and did a little research and looked in California and New York and Texas and maybe a few other states and some SEC enforcement actions. Just curious, trying to find out, how many film offerings ended up in litigation, and it turns out more than I thought. I was surprised. And you can follow up and do your own research in whatever state you're in. You can go to the state securities board or whatever it's called in your state, the Securities Regulatory Authority, and go to their archives, their enforcement archives, and look up film or film offerings and see how many of them, how many filmmakers got into trouble. Like I say, I was somewhat surprised. All three of those individuals were convicted securities fraud, the three individuals that I wrote the article about. Two of them actually went to prison. The entertainment attorney went to prison. One of them, although convicted, did not go to prison because he died before he reported to prison. So you don't want to really be in that situation. Now, so what are the elements of securities fraud? What did the government convict them of? They convicted them there are 4 elements: deception, intent, reliance, and loss. The filmmakers made deliberate misstatements, or they hid important facts. In other words, your obligation is to disclose all material aspects of the transaction. Don't leave anything out that is important, and everything you state must be accurate. That's it. And if you fail to do that, you may get called on this element of deception. Intent, and then the government has to prove that you intended to deceive the investors, and they did in this case, and that the investor relied on your deception, the false information, or the information that was left out. Uh, and that's pretty easy to show. I mean, they gave you a chunk of change, and then loss is the last element. The reliance of the investor must have caused financial harm, which is pretty easy to show. Now, if we switch over and let's say the disgruntled investor in your case decided to file a lawsuit and went to a private attorney and said, let's go this route. What happens is the investor goes in and makes allegations in a complaint. And those allegations can go something like this. The producer sold me a security. I know it's a security because I'm a passive investor. I don't qualify as an active investor. And I paid the producer a certain amount of money, and I can demonstrate that. And the producer either made no attempt to comply with securities laws, didn't give me any kind of disclosure document or whatever, and the producer tried but failed, or the producer tried but failed to comply with securities laws. In that case, we're talking, well, okay, they left out something important. They stated something that was inaccurate. They just failed to comply to disclose all material aspects of the transaction. And then, though, this is interesting, the burden of proof shifts to the producer. That is, the burden of who has to demonstrate and prove whatever information they're trying to prove. And so the producer comes into court afterwards and says, okay, well, yeah, I sold the investor security. I can't deny that. And yeah, I accepted the investor's money. That was shown. But I did comply. This is the producer's argument. I did comply with securities laws. So then it's your burden to show that you complied with securities laws. And that would be like, okay, well, here's a disclosure document I provided to the investor before they invested, so they had all the information. It fully disclosed all material aspects of the transaction. I didn't leave anything out that it was important, and everything I stated was stated accurately. Basically, that's it. So that you have to prove that, though. And if you don't have a disclosure document, somebody tells you, well, you don't have to have a PPM, and you don't have a PPM, it's going to be hard to prove that. And so you're dead in the water. What are the possible consequences? I mean, spread out on this slide here, there's a whole bunch of consequences, all bad. And it kind of boggles the mind that anybody who has any inkling of that they're selling a security would not make a good faith effort to try to comply with securities laws, find out what's required, and not ask a fellow producer or a business plan consultant because they're not into securities laws. But let's look at the possible consequences. There could be some career or reputational damage. You may not care about that, or you may, because it could mean ultimately that you can't do any more investor offerings. That could be one of the possibilities. It could make it difficult to attract talent for your future projects. It could be the end of your producing career. And so that's a lot on the line there in terms of reputation if you do this wrong. Private lawsuits, we just talked about that, the burden of proof in private lawsuits and so forth. There could be treble damages. Some states authorize treble damages in these lawsuits. There could be punitive damages designed to punish you for what you did. Or in some states, there could be multiples of actual damages. Whatever the investor's losses actually were could be multiplied in some states. And so then there are also in enforcement actions by the SEC, there could be civil penalties. You might have to return whatever profits you made using their money. There could be some civil fines. On the criminal side, there could be lengthy prison sentences, which is what occurred in the case in the Los Angeles Lawyer magazine article. There could be massive fines. There could be you could be required to pay restitution, giving the money back, forfeit whatever profit you made, and there could be injunctions which would prevent you in the future from engaging in this sort of activity, raising money from investors for an independent film. So there are a lot of things to think about. and I encourage you to take it seriously. Now, this, as I said, was just a short presentation, kind of an overview. Uh, and as I pointed out, you could go to the Los Angeles Lawyer article and or my book. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But here's what we covered. Anybody can be a disgruntled investor. You can't predict that with accuracy. Complaints can go to the SEC, to the state enforcement authorities or litigators, and that's exactly what happened in the lawsuit, which was the subject of the article, or the enforcement action, which was the subject of the article. That was a disgruntled investor in Alabama who went to the Alabama State Board, or whatever it's called, and complained about the offering. And then elements of securities, fraud, deceit, intent, reliance, and loss. Those are the elements of securities fraud. And then there are a number of possible undesirable consequences, which we covered quickly. So I wish you the best. It's important that you take this seriously because you can go to prison. So that's pretty risky. The information in this brief presentation, again, the article was in Los Angeles Lawyer Magazine, September 2019. You can update that with your own research. I included that article and a couple of other articles from the Los Angeles Lawyer Magazine that I'd published over the years in my newest book, Investor Financing of Independent Film, Routledge Focal Press publication. And so that information is available. So take a moment to check it out and protect yourself, because that's what securities compliance is really about from your perspective, is protecting your future, your career, and staying out of jail. So best of luck to you, and I hope to see you in the next video.